12 p.m., February 9th, 1864. John Daly, William Buckley, James Masterson, and Three-Fingered Jack were sitting in the Aurora jail. The only thing between them and freedom was a hastily put together, flimsy jail cell and one inept guard. While being detained, the men kept themselves busy, drinking, gambling, and smoking, seemingly without a care in the world. Within an hour, they would all be dead. You know, it's best to start these kind of tales at the beginning, way back to 1860, when a little bit of gold was discovered in Esmeralda Canyon.
They found gold! 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 Gold!
This little discovery brought a few hundred men to the area, where they set up the tent city of Esmeralda. Within 1 year's time, the tent city of Esmeralda would become the mighty city of Aurora, that would eventually grow to a population of 10,000. But this was no polished town like Virginia City. No, this was a rough and tumble town with a population that consisted of men. Men who loved to drink, men who loved to gamble, gunslinging men, fighting men, and men who liked to murder each other. And to service these fine young men were the 22 saloons, numerous gambling houses, and houses of ill repute up and down Main Street. And not a church in sight. The lawless nature of this town was thanks to a little state line problem. It seems Aurora was both in California and Nevada at the same time, even simultaneously becoming the county seat in each state. This jurisdiction problem caused Aurora to be sort of a no man's land when it came to law and order. The only thing that could even kind of resemble the law were the self-appointed marshals that worked for the mining companies. The mining companies had hired thugs, gunmen, and wanted outlaws to protect their assets. Men paid to intimidate, enforce, and when necessary, kill. The main players in this mine game were the Real del Monte Mining Company and the Pond Mining Company. On the Del Monte side, enforcement was handled by members of the Lloyd Gang, which was led by one Mr. George Lloyd, who was a semi-famous, well-known Kimbo Slice-type street fighter from Sacramento. Described as brutal and fearless, Lloyd was the kind of man hired for violence rather than diplomacy. The Pond Mining Company hired members of the infamous Daly Gang. At its center was John Daly, a strikingly handsome 24-year-old outlaw who had robbed and murdered his way west from New York. By the time he had reached Aurora, he was already a ruthless killer with 11 notches under his belt. Alongside him was James Buckley, a seasoned criminal with a gambling problem, known for his cold, emotionless demeanor and an unbreakable poker face. And last but not least, Three-Fingered Jack, a 35-year-old Irishman who came to Aurora from San Francisco. Three-Fingered Jack was a hardened criminal and a legendary saloonist, and owner of the Exchange Saloon. Together, these men formed part of what would be called the Daly Gang. At this time, Aurora was a town run by unchecked outlaws, leading to nightly violence and almost daily murders. Now, we could start this story at the very beginning with murder number 1, but in the interest of saving time, we're going to skip forward a bit and talk about murders number 26, and 27, with the sensational killing of George Lloyd. George Lloyd was a semi-famous street fighter with a kind of unconventional hero type of reputation. He'd had a long-standing feud with John Daly. Now, this feud came to a head one night while drinking at Three Finger Jack's Delta Exchange Saloon, when George Lloyd and John Daly had words. And as often happens in Aurora, words quickly turned into pistols. And pistols turned into bullets. And some 6 or 8 shots were fired amongst the 50 people at the Delta that night. John Daly shot George Lloyd straight through the heart, killing him almost instantly. On his way out, George Lloyd managed to shoot Daly in the leg. A third bullet hit and killed a man named McGee, who was walking past the saloon when a stray bullet shot through the window and hit him. The murder of George Lloyd was big news, with papers all over the country reporting on it. Which would make one think, when 2 men are murdered in front of 50 witnesses, there would be some sort of justice. But in Aurora, justice began with a lowercase j, and no one was ever questioned, arrested, or charged with the killings. Just another man dead became the unofficial motto for Aurora as everyone just turned their heads. Who had all met their maker by gang violence. But everything was about to change with one act of horse thievery. One fine April day, Daly Gang member Jim Sears helped himself to Louis Whitehart's favorite horse. Upon discovering the theft, Louis rushed to the nearby Wellington station and reported the theft to station master William R. Johnson. Johnson promptly sent one of his hired hands, a man named Johnny Rogers, to apprehend Sears and recover the horse. Rogers finally caught up with Sears in Sweetwater, Nevada, and in true Wild West form, pistols were drawn and Rogers shot Sears dead. And Rogers had promptly returned the horse to its rightful owner. Now, this should have been the end of it. I mean, after all, stealing a horse in those days, that was a murderable offense. But John Daly, however, didn't see it the same way. To him, this wasn't justice. It was personal. Sears was like a brother to him, and he was out for blood. First on his list, station owner William Johnson. So on a cold February day in 1864, William Johnson had rolled into Aurora on important business to sell some potatoes. After which, he spent the evening, as most Auroran men do, gambling and drinking in the mini saloons. About 4 a.m, a very inebriated Johnson stumbled out of the Gem Saloon and into the street. He didn't make it very far. Witnesses later testified that Daly and another gunman rushed Johnson from opposite directions, shot him in the head, cut his throat, then lit him on fire while he lay dying. By sunrise, his burnt body was found still laying in the middle of Pine Street. This time, the Daly Gang had gone too far. This murder was different. Johnson wasn't a gunfighter. He wasn't a cheat. He wasn't part of a gang. He was a good man, a moral man, a church-going man. Someone had to do something. So 200 of the town's upstanding citizens formed a vigilante committee, hell-bent on arresting those responsible for the heinous crime. Up until this point, the town didn't even have a jail, so one had to be quickly built. Upon its completion, John Daly, James Buckley, James Masterson, and Three Finger Jack were promptly arrested and locked up. While awaiting their trial, the 4 men set about to have a good time, drinking, smoking, and gambling without a care in the world. I mean, this wasn't the first time any of these men had been to jail, and they were sure it wouldn't be the last. Besides, there was no constable or marshal or law enforcement in town to even hang them if they wanted to. So at noon, on February 9th, 1864, One's not sure what was going through their heads when they heard the low rumble of 200 men marching towards the jail. But this wasn't the sound of someone there to bust them out. No, this was the sound of a lynch mob. Earlier that day, the townspeople had built a scaffolding, and a crowd of 5,000 had already gathered outside the armory hall. As the 4 condemned men were taken out of the jail and marched to the gallows. Governor James Nye had gotten wind of what Aurora was planning and dispatched an immediate telegram demanding that there be no violence without a fair trial. Samuel Youngs, the Esmeralda County Commissioner, received the telegraph and replied with the following message. All is quiet and orderly. 4 men will be hung in a half hour. This caused the governor to jump on a horse and rush to Aurora. Unfortunately, he would arrive too late. The first of the men to be hung was James Buckley. His nerves were cool. His voice was steady. He calmly admitted what everybody already knew. He and John Daly killed William Johnson. Then went on to say that the other 2 men were innocent. Next up was a drunk and hysterical John McDowell, aka Three-Fingered Jack, who ranted and raved to the crowd, calling upon God, shouting his innocence, and that he was being murdered unjustly. Then, in an unreal Hollywood-type style moment, he suddenly pulled a derringer out of his coat and pressed it to his chest and pulled the trigger. But the cap snapped and the gun misfired. He then cursed, threw it down, stepped back and said, "Fine, I'll die like a tiger." This spectacle was followed by a very somber and quiet James Masterson, who simply said nothing more than, "Gentlemen, I'm innocent." Last but never least was a very drunk John Daly. So drunk, in fact, that he kept falling off the podium and had to be propped up just to make it to the noose. He admitted to the killing, saying he regretted nothing except for the fact that he couldn't live long enough to kill all of Johnson's family and friends. He then reached in his pocket, threw a hoard of silver coins into the crowd, saying, "I won't need these anymore where I'm going." The town pastor then gave a short prayer for their souls. The cannons fired, and the trapdoor dropped. This incident brought Aurora's reign of lawlessness to an abrupt end. The remaining gang members fled town, and Aurora would go on to grow into a booming mining city of nearly 10,000 people before the mines eventually gave out. Today, only the cemetery remains, a stark reminder of Aurora's earliest, most volatile years, when ambitions ran high, fortunes were made and lost overnight, and lawlessness ruled the streets.
In the pines where the sun never shines, you'll shiver when the cold wind blows. There's a grave in the pine where the sun never shines. There's a grave that's shaded with the pine. My true love lies in a narrow grave in the pines where the sun never shines. She stole lies deep on my true lover's grave in the pines in the